Hi everybody, Barry Whelan here, CEO of Excel Recruitment. I'm just talking careers with Nikki Murran, who is the director of our grocery division. So Nikki has had an extensive career in retail herself, working in the grocery industry, and she's also worked with me for quite some time recruiting grocery talent. So today I'm going to talk to her a little bit about what it's like to have a career in grocery retail. And we're going to talk about a few aspects of the job and maybe why people might be interested in a career in grocery retail. So I suppose, Nikki, the first thing I'm going to say or ask you is kind of to take me through your own career in grocery retail. I mean, for myself, I started in grocery retail when I was 16. I started working in the local convenience store, and then I went to work for Duns and Corners course, and then I did my degree and I went into management, and I had a really enjoyable career in grocery. But tell me your own story.
Should have been, I suppose, in maybe 6th class in school, so 12. And I was under my mum's feet, so my dad took me into the spar in the hilltop at that stage, and I started bagging penny sweets, facing off the bread, and I progressed on to bagging potatoes.
And of course your dad, Gus, had a couple of stores.
So he's 2 stores in Clontarf now, but at the time it was one in Raheny and one in Clontarf. So I started there, and it was mostly, like I said, to get out of my mum's feet, but I loved it, and I loved the customer interaction, and obviously because I was very small, so the customers were lovely to me, so I really enjoyed it. So I used to hound my parents to let me work, and they did, and so progressed from there, from working on the shop floor to behind the tills on a big day, and yeah, so I grew up, I suppose, in the stores, and I worked behind the tills. And then on the deli, I suppose, was a turning point when I moved on to the deli, and I found that actually there's so much more to food.
Sure.
And to food retail. And so I went on, at the time it would have been all the courses offered by Cuisine de France, and I got very into that. And then progressed up to store manager role in the store, which was very intimidating because I was 18 at the time.
Yeah. And
a lot of my staff were 17, 18, 19, and a lot of kids in college, but I was their store manager.
Yeah, but your dad had the shop.
And it didn't quite work like that. He had this, my sister felt it worked like that.
Right.
But I didn't. But no, I really enjoyed that. So I did a couple of years there, and then Dad took a little break from the business, so I oversaw the 2 stores for a little time. All through college, and then after college I went travelling and came back and decided out of, I don't know, madness, that I wanted to be an area manager, and I wanted to be an area manager somewhere where I could learn something really different and bring it back. My idea was to bring it back to my dad's stores. So it was 2008 and I joined Lidl as an area manager.
Yeah.
And so I was in my young 20s, I'll give away my age, and I went in and I had 108 staff underneath me, a beautiful Audi, and all of the power. So I loved it, I absolutely loved it. And I think it was you're so thrown in at the deep end, and whilst the training was great, it is a baptism of fire. So
sure.
I went in, and again, I was young 20s, my store managers were in their 40s and 50s, were guys that had run, one guy had run Dunnes stores, another guy had run a very large Tesco store, and then, I, all of 20-something, went in and was in charge. But I loved it.
Very good. And so I suppose, why would you recommend a career in the grocery?
Well, the reasons that I loved it, I suppose, is the same reasons that retailers still come to me today and they love what they do. It's the people, it's always the customer. It always comes back time and time again that they love dealing with customers, that they get an awful lot from the communities that they serve.
Sure.
And that's across, regardless of the brand. That is true of nearly every retailer. Like, they bring it back to the teams that they work with and the customers that they deal with on a daily basis. They feel like they're part of the community. They feel like the community relies on them as much as they rely on the community. And the really good customers out there start everything with their customers' needs. So yes, the store needs to be clean for an inspection, but it needs to be clean for our customers.
Sure.
Yes, the store needs to be well packed so we can drive sales, but it needs to be well packed because I don't want 85-year-old Biddy from down the road coming in and not getting what she needs and having to walk back up tomorrow. So
sure.
It's very much customer driven. So that's why I liked it, and I know a lot of the guys that I recruit for who are in the industry a long time, it's customer and it's the teams that they work with. There's some incredibly talented, incredibly passionate retailers out there at all levels, and they're great teams to work amongst. And there's very much a sense of family, and we're in this together, and we're working together to provide the service to our community.
Yeah, what I loved about the industry, I loved a number of things about it, but I love the fact that at a very young age you can be responsible for large commercial entities, you know, as a kid, when I was maybe, 17 or 18, I was managing multiple stores, a small chain called the Shopping Basket. You know, going into Dunn's, you could have a really, really strong career because the business was continually progressing people, so you could work your way up the ranks pretty fast.
Yeah.
And what I loved about it was the responsibility that I felt you would get in no other industry.
Yeah.
In your mid-20s, where you're managing teams of a couple of hundred people, where you're managing commercial businesses that might turn over 10 or 20 million euros a year, like these really significant businesses, and you're given all that responsibility at a very young age. So I love that. But I kind of also love the regimental side of grocery. I liked that, you know, the same product came in, the same customers came in, the product went on the shelves, went down the door, and you know, I really enjoyed that aspect to it because I really enjoyed the kind of buzz and the pace of it, and no day. Like, I mean, the amount of retailers I've interviewed over the last 20 years doing this that have said to me that no day is exactly the same, and that was the real buzz that they got from grocery retail, and I, you know, and I really got that buzz. I loved it. No day was exactly the same, so it was really enjoyable from that aspect. But take me through the career ladder. Like, how do you work your way up to become a store manager? How long will it take you to do that? And we'll talk about money in a minute in terms of how much people earn on that journey. But like, what's the you know, the critical path in terms of the career ladder in grocery retail?
Sure, I mean, it varies so much depending on the retailer that you're with. But I would say a lot of the candidates that we meet, say the more junior candidates that are starting out in their career, if they get a foot in terms of they're working part-time through school or through education, and then they become a supervisor at the weekend. And really, once they've started that role, even part-time, that's their first foot on the ladder.
Sure.
And then usually they finish off their degree or their education, even their leaving cert, and they come in and they say, okay, you know, I think I want to do this. I think I want to do this seriously. And at that point, I would always push them back into the store that they're in to see can they give back to the retail they've worked for, and really grow into a full-time trainee manager role. And I think that's one of the most exciting roles that I recruit for. So it's getting these candidates who are young and ambitious and enthusiastic and hungry for knowledge, and we put them into stores all the time as trainee managers. So they are manager in training. And so some of the really good retailers will take them and, you know, put them in every department in the store and progress them in each department. And what you find is that candidates often fall in love with one particular department. So they might fall in love with fresh food, or even I had a guy that we placed in as a trainee manager, but he covered on the butchery and did so well there that they actually sent him to do a butcher course, and he's now the store's butcher. And so once you've kind of completed the trainee manager role, that can go on for anything up to maybe say 3 years. So some people will find a niche that really suits them, be fresh food or deli or the fruit and veg or whatever, and they progress into those departments. And go through that channel. And then other retailers like prefer the broader store management, so they usually go into department manager, probably in ambient or stock control, and then from there they go to assistant manager and store manager. In terms of how long does it take, how long is a piece of string? It depends on how driven they are, is a big part of it, and how hard they work is another part. But again, one of the really great things about retail is that it's not there's not so much bureaucracy around it. It's more based on how hard you work and how much you're willing to put in. You know, it takes it.
I remember that from my own career. Things haven't changed that much since I worked in retail. I think they've changed in that, you know, when I worked in retail, it was very hours focused. We did a lot of hours, and that was before, you know, I suppose legislation, you know, that really controlled people's hours. You know, so we would have put in a lot of hours, but I suppose there was kind of, you know, there was working silly hours, and then not being at your absolute best when at work, and that kind of, certainly when I was leaving the industry, that was sort of on its way out, and I presume it is today. But let's say, so if I start off as a trainee manager, what sort of salary will I get starting off?
Sure. Well, again, it very much depends on where you're working. So if I place a trainee manager with a year's experience in a supervisor capacity, they would usually go into, say, a smaller convenience store.
Sure.
They could go in on the low 20s. If I place them into a medium-sized supermarket, they'll go in on mid-20s. and a large supermarket, they could start on 29 to 30. But those guys would generally have done training manager in a smaller store as opposed to supervisor.
They have a bit of experience.
Yeah, so they would bring something. They will have managed people is the big piece here. And that's, I suppose, that year or two, whilst you're learning all the departments, you're also learning really for the first time how to manage and motivate the people around you. And in retail, that is the difference between a successful manager and an unsuccessful one.
And how much will a store manager earn? I mean, my own understanding is it depends on the size of the store.
Depends on the size of the store and the turnover the store is doing. If you're saying a small convenience store, the average is probably 35 to 40,000 per annum. If you are looking at the bigger supermarkets, it goes right up to over 100 grand. So it can be really, really lucrative.
Yeah.
But those guys work hard to get there.
And obviously, the salary will range depending on the size of the store, but is there certain groups that you would see would be very strong around remuneration compared to others? What's the market like out there?
Okay, sure. So, I mean, the discounters are notorious for paying really, really well. So the guys that they look for, they work really hard, but they also are like you were saying about the hours, they are treated quite well. But in the discounters, your salary goes up automatically every year for the first 8 years in the business. And then when you move from assistant manager to store manager, it starts rising again. So those guys, their store managers can be paid up to mid-90s. So that's, really, really strong.
So I'm interested in we talk about the discounters, and what I'm interested in is kind of talking about, let's say, the typical day in the life of a store manager of a discounter store, so an Aldi or a Lidl, and the typical day in the life of a supermarket manager, let's say from a Super Value or a Eurospar or maybe even a Dunn's. Talk to me a bit about that.
Okay, sure. So the day in the life of a discount retailer, say. So generally, say store manager would come in and they would open the store, and that would be, they could start anything from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. And they would come in, and the first thing they would do is, along with the guys that are doing the pack with them, they would go in, they would take the delivery in from the back stores, and they would pack, and they would spend the first 2 hours of the day really packing. And they pack alongside their team to set the pace, so it's, it is really physical. And then once they're finished packing, they would go and welcome the rest of the team into the store, get them set up on tills, give them their duties for the day, and then maybe have a walk across the store to see what needs to be addressed that day. When they're finishing that, they'll have a look at kind of how long the pack took and are they on schedule in terms of productivity. At that point, they'd have quite a few staff across the store, so they'd probably have a quick team huddle, make sure everyone is on target to finish on time, or else knows what they're doing for the rest of their shift. They probably start into their orders, they get their memos down from head office, make sure everything's implemented that's supposed to be, that all their offers are up and running for that morning. If it's a Monday, they would start doing their rotas, they would look at their plan for the week in terms of the specials that are coming in and that they've enough space and time planned in to organise that. And then generally they would spend an hour or two on tills covering breaks, because that's what happens in the world of discount. And then once the breaks are covered, they're probably going back onto the floor themselves to maintain the floor for the last hour or two before they hand over to one of the rest of their management team that evening.
And what about in a Super Value or a full service supermarket?
Similar, but very much more hands off in comparison. Again, depending on the size of the store. But in discount retail, you'll find that the guys are involved in the packing, and they're much more involved in the tills and the actual hands-on maintaining the floor. In the bigger supermarkets, it's slightly more hands-off, so they spend a bit more time coaching and training and developing the team around them. So again, they'd come in the morning, they would, rather than do the pack, they would check the pack and go through and make sure that they're happy with the levels, that they're happy that the orders came in, they're happy with the quality on the fruit and veg, and the dates and the chill. So a really good detailed floor walk is how they would usually start their day. And then rather than giving out the tills, they would go to the cash office, make sure everything's good, they have enough staff for the day, and that the cash office manager knows, or the service area manager knows that they've enough staff on, that's all looked after for the day. Then they would go down to their fresh departments and spend quite a bit of time with these other department heads, so that the butchers have a plan for their specials and how their waste is, and is there anything he needs to know or she needs to know about that. And the same again on the deli and the bakery, so making sure that all the targets, everything comes back to these roles, or these store manager roles, are all target driven. Like they're very closely controlled, so they're going through those targets to make sure that each day is working towards the end of day and a week target. And then again, making sure the shop floor is maintained, making sure that all the new promotions and that are implemented across the store floor, and obviously engaging with customers is a part that goes without saying. So
And as you say, no day is exactly the same in retail.
No.
So what's the biggest challenge, do you think, working as a supermarket manager?
I think it's people. I think it's one of the best and most challenging things, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I think it's about making sure that the people around you are motivated and that they're engaged and that they're as excited as the management team. So you'll find a lot of the staff in retail are part-time. A lot of them, this isn't their calling, they're training for something else, perhaps in education, but they need to come in and give it as much effort and energy as those where this is their career. So it's making sure that everyone is as engaged, and then dealing with customers and making sure that you're dealing with the customers in the best way so that they are feeling that they're getting the best service that they can.
I think it's very interesting. I think when I left retail 20 years ago, so the year 2000 I finished up and moved into recruitment, and I think things have changed dramatically. I think when I think about the modern supermarket environment now and as it was 20 years ago when I worked in the industry, I think the customer has become more challenging as competition has increased. Like when I left retail in 2000, Aldi had just opened up their first store. Sure. So it's a completely different landscape, and the Irish consumer, I think, has changed dramatically in terms of the offer that they want, the range that they want, and the service. So I see the pressure around customer. I think also the people aspect's really interesting because certainly when I was recruiting for grocery retail for, let's say, from 2000 to the recession in 2008, 2009, it was such a massive issue trying to find people to work in the industry. It wasn't that attractive to people because of working hours or perceptions, but in fact it's a pretty cool industry and very resilient. And then from 2009 onwards, it was completely opposite. People were dying to get into the industry because it was so resilient to the recession. But I do think that people challenge certainly came around again, and we discussed this as before COVID happened, how challenging it was to get good people. And I think certainly COVID has shown again how resilient the supermarket industry is and how good an industry it is to work in. If you want a solid job that is never going to disappear, people are always going to eat, they're always going to go to supermarkets, it is a very consistent customer, consistent turnover, and it's an exciting industry to work in. Managing large amounts of people is really difficult, but it's also massively rewarding. And I think when we do things like interviewing candidates, or we meet our clients, or we do the Grocery Management Awards when we meet the nominees for that, you see that kind of passion and love of managing people, but also that love of the consumer and trying to achieve really strong customer service and have really happy customers coming back to your store. And I think that if anyone's thinking about getting into the industry, for me the big benefits of the industry is that steady paycheck, the fact that it is really recessionary proof, and it is indeed pandemic proof, and that's pretty cool. And the challenges of the industry is that people piece. You're managing large amounts of people, and people, they do their own thing, they think, they breathe, they walk, they talk, and they can be difficult to manage at times. And that is the key to it. I think also it's become, a modern supermarket manager is managing a profit and loss nowadays, and that can be challenging itself. You have to be numeric, you have to be a marketeer, you have to be a people manager, you have to be a HR manager. Like it's a really all-round kind of career, and for me that's the exciting part of it, and also the challenge. So if you were going to pitch joining, going for a career in supermarket management to a young person, Nikki, what advice would you give them? Why would you tell them to come into the industry?
Well, I think you just have. Well, generally when I meet training managers, because this happens all the time. So I meet candidates who have just finished education, have some experience in retail, and come in and their degree might be in accounting. And so they're like, I think I might go into accounting, but also, I've spent the last 4 years working in a centre store, and I've really enjoyed it. So I'm not sure what to do. So I'm sitting here.
Who wants to be a boring accountant?
Who wants to be a accountant?
Retail.
And so, and they're legitimately asking, like they're saying, well, I know I like retail, I know I've enjoyed it so far, but I know I have to work Saturday nights, and my friends go out Saturday. Well, my friends used to go out Saturday nights.
Sure.
But accountants don't do that, they don't have to work Saturday nights. And so that's kind of all of the information that they start with. And so it's about finding, I suppose, obviously it's not for everyone, right? So it doesn't have to be. But these candidates that I meet that enjoy it, they're only on the tip of the iceberg. So what I would say is why to get into grocery retail. Yes, if you're I suppose, a bit more experience, you'll understand that it's recession proof, and that will really be a clincher, especially in these times. That's enough for me in terms of why to work in grocery retail. But for younger candidates coming in, is that it's so exciting, and that you can map out your own path, and that you are, you know, you control your destiny. You know, it sounds a bit extreme, but you control your destiny, because it's one of the very few industries where it doesn't matter who you play golf with, it doesn't matter, you know, who your friends.
What school you went to?
Yeah, it truly doesn't. What matters is that you come in and you give it your all when you're there. It matters that you motivate people around you, and very often that's why, you know, getting stuck in and actually doing the work alongside. It's that you're using your time intelligently. It's that you have good customer service. It's that you're happy to go above and beyond. And I don't mean, you know, above and beyond, stay extra hours, because that's not really accepted anymore. And you're right, when you and I worked in retail, that's how you were judged, how many hours you did in a week.
Yep.
And so, but now it's not. It's that you're using your time wisely. But it might be as simple as, you know, when a particular customer comes into the store, you always carry their bags to the car, you know, and that sort of thing is seen and appreciated. And it is, I mean, Ireland still appreciates those small gestures in the world of retail. You know, it is important that the store manager knows your name, or better yet, that, you know, the young new manager that's entered the business gets the opportunity to learn everyone's name. So I think, why would I join? Because it's a really exciting industry. No 2 days the same. It's really fast paced, but also because you can go as far as you choose, and there's nothing stopping you, only yourself. And you know, so what's not to love?
Okay, cool. Nikki, thanks a million.
You're very welcome.
Really appreciate that insight.
No problem. Thanks so much.